Good morning. Lovely to see you all again. And great to resume these precious teachings, sharing of these precious teachings. So let's begin, and we'll do another 15 pages or so today of the commentary on the dedication aspiration of the great Organ Lho Nuden Dorje. Michael, how's your voice today?
Not bad.
Not bad? Okay. Even when it's not bad, it's pretty darn good. So may our Umzi lead us in refuge, bodhicitta, vajrasattva, mandala offering, and guru yoga. That'd be great. Thank you. Jinla kunju lama lakapchi, grodu soso yidam lakapchi, barsho kunzo kamro lakapchi, kami sowa sangye lakapchi, shiva chandra damshu lakapchi, soki shinjo gendo lakapchi, Trile Nagda Chokyo Lakapchi. Namo to attain one's fast awakening. I and other sentient beings equal space. Go for refuge to the Guru, source of all blessings. We go for refuge to deities, bestower of supreme city. We go for refuge to Kinis, dispel of all obstacles. We go for refuge to the Buddha, the first among humans. We go for refuge, Sublime, Dharma, peaceful, free from attachment. We go for refuge, the Sangha, supreme field of accumulation. We go for refuge, the Dharmas, masters of activity. Namo. Now to attain the abundance of fast awakening, I and other sentient beings equal space. Go for refuge, the Guru, source of all blessings. We go for refuge, the deities, bestower of supreme city. We go for refuge, the Kinis, dispel of all obstacles. We go for refuge, the Buddha, first among humans. We go for refuge, Sublime, Dharma, peaceful, free from attachment. We go for refuge, the Sangha, supreme field of accumulation. We go for refuge, Dharmas, masters of activity. Samche Lugna Dragna Shin Deva Chola Nampa Nilaga Kunla Taramyo Nyambe Sanjodi Jamchu Nimpo Tochu Dagiki Dagi Guru Samshem Kundoche Samje Gopan Sejir Dopaja Sejir Rosa Loje Nimpo Lam Lame Chodir Abbe Sompargi Beings of be free from suffering, be joyful and truly abide in supreme happiness. Be generous, extreme mind, impartial towards all, in order to attain the heart of awakening. In order that I may fully benefit the being's six realms, I must attain the stage Buddhahood in this very lifetime. Therefore, I'll be very diligent as unsurpassed teaching, the path endlessly clear about your essence. May all sentient beings of samsara be free from suffering. Be joyful and truly abide in supreme happiness. I create a supreme mind, impartial towards all, in order to attain the heart of awakening. In order that I may fully benefit the beings of the six realms, I must attain the stage of Buddhahood in this very lifetime. Therefore, I very diligent as unsurpassed teaching, the path endlessly clear about your essence. And spontaneously arising as Vajrasattva, as a great liberating benefit for self and all sentient beings.
Yaya Menja Sato Samaya Madhukalaya Menja Sato Tenopatishta Triyo Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava
Sarva Siddhi Me Prayacha Sarva Karma Suchame Titam Shriyam Guruvam Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Bendra Mame Musha Bendra Bhava Mahasaya Sato Bendra Satta Samaya Manupalaya Bendra Satta Tvenopa Tishtadrito Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayacha Sarva Karma Suchame Titam Shriyam Guruham Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Bendra Mame Musha Bendra Bhava Mahasamya Sato Bendra Sapta Samaya Manupalaya Bendra Sapta Tvenopa Trishta Grito Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayacha Sarva Karma Suchame Titam Shriyam Guruvam Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Bendra Mame Musa Bendra Bhava Mahasamaya Sato Om Bendra Sata Om Bendra Sata Om Bendra Sata
Yoya Sachi
Chu Shing Metodram Rirabhrishi Nidayam Pali Sangye Zinglam Nide Purvai Drogunam Zazindu Chovarsho Om Guru Deva Dakini Ratna Mandala Praticya Swaha. Moistened with scented water, ranking flowers, adorn the smooth, the four continents, sun. By offering the visualized Buddha food, may all migrating beings take birth in pure birth. Om Guru Deva Dakini Ratnamanda Praticya Swaha.
Yoya Om Om
Rangri Karang Zinkamsu Aranganga Me Purana Arangsa Sawela Mala Nagidum We Sovade Jaludrupaji original pure awareness. In the palace of unceasing and radiance is one's own vibrant energy, the root Guru, to whom I supplicate devoted mind, bless me to accomplish the rainbow line. With one's own original pure awareness, in the palace of unceasing and radiance is one's own vibrant energy, the root Guru, to whom I supplicate devoted mind, bless me to accomplish the rainbow line. Excellent. Lecture. Well, let's continue on with the commentary. If you have any questions, because you've perhaps been reading or this or something that's arisen to do with this a profound text of the dedication aspiration, happy to hear that. Do you have any questions at all that are connected to this? Yes.
I notice when a question comes up and then there's agitation, is it sometimes better to let the question go and, do you know what I mean, rather than work it?
Do you mean when it's in class or personally?
Well, especially in class. I
Yeah.
notice more agitation in class when I feel a question coming up. There's some discomfort, and it's almost like the question is an antidote to the agitation or something. And that, so I don't know how important the question is, or is that just excitement over wanting to know something?
It can be. It can be all kinds of things. I'm not going to try to guess all the possible causal reasons. It could be even maybe anxiety of being in school and asking questions and all kinds of things, or being in a public group and asking a question, and all kinds of many possibilities. We don't really need to know why. I think you just have to go by your guts. Even if you're concerned about the question, there's agitation, go for it. See what happens. Why not? Mm-hmm. What's the worst thing that could happen? All laugh at you. We all cry, we all clap, we all get up and dance. We don't say anything. And anything could happen. So.
But it seems somewhat in this context that the answer to almost everything is pristine awareness, right? Is to rest in.
That's right. So you could do that, but it's not necessarily compassionate. If you keep responding to everybody's question, which is just rest in non-clinging awareness, just rest in pristine awareness, it is actually not, for some in the room, it may be exactly the right answer. But actually for many, it's not the right answer. One has to go where it is the most useful and compassionate way. So for instance, we can go through this and say, here we are, we're studying and we're practicing and going through the Yangzab Preliminary Liberating Instructions, but somebody else in the room, I may say, actually, I don't really think you should do too much of that. You should actually do a month or 2 months of a classic loving kindness meditation. What? Absolutely. That's more appropriate. So when a teacher gives out teaching, you also have to be the judge, unless you come and speak to them directly. You have to be the judge whether that's interesting to you and actually something that would be of greatest benefit at this time. It's really important. So how one answers a question really has to do with what's coming behind it. And really one should really start every question, which is, why are you asking that question? Not in a negative way. What's behind it? Why do you really want to know? And then we can actually get down to whether it's contemplate pristine awareness. All will be answered. Absolutely true. But actually not necessarily compassionate. That's like saying, I'm really having a problem with death. Yes, well, death is the temporary end of temporary phenomena. Excuse me, but that doesn't feel really quite right. So it's not that you're lowering down, but you have to realize we're causal beings, and we often need causal explanations, something that we can actually handle, instead of non-clinging awareness. Non-clinging awareness. Don't cling. Don't cling. Have you ever said to anybody, don't cling? They look at you like, excuse me? For some, that's absolutely appropriate. For others, it's not. So this is the resting, dwelling, and energetic activity of what's called the two-in-one. All phenomena are utterly free. The total universe is pervaded with unobstructed Buddha nature. But at the same time, there are relative beings with apparitions of self that require explanations and teachings that are appropriate to that. That's like saying to the birds, we're not going to feed you today because there's all kinds of food around, and actually the universe will provide. It's not necessarily causally appropriate or compassionate. Yeah, good. This is really important. Yes?
Is there an in-between state between the Alaya consciousness and Amala consciousness? Does it go from 8 eighth consciousness?
It all depends on which text you're reading.
Right, okay.
We always think of, well, the Alaya consciousness was proposed traditionally, as I've understood it, by the great Yogacharans, the great meditators of the Yogacara so-called school, also called Chittamatra. No lowly practitioners, I'll tell you, and they're extraordinary. But they wanted not just an explanation, but a level of experience, to describe a level of experience of the ground where all the potential activity is bubbling from. That's an experience. So what you have is, depending on which text of the Chittamatrans you read and how it's translated, many in Chinese. There's no Sanskrit text anymore. Some are in China, some are in Sanskrit, some are in Tibetan, some are in both, and some in Chinese. You can see they've obviously gone through some evolutionary stages by which they describe this. So yes, there's actually places where I've seen where there's more than 8 consciousnesses, 9 consciousnesses. Depends on description. But I think that's really quite sufficient, is the ground and then the stainless ground. And you'll see other descriptions, especially in the Dzogchen tradition and so on, where they extend it further to utter total purity, the ground of purity. Depends on realization. Depends on the compassion. No need for an intermediate stage. You'd have this gradual purification. So this is always remember, generally speaking, until you get to a certain point, humans want either black or white. They want divisions. There is no unconscious. There's consciousness. And even there isn't any consciousness. All those are conceptual divisions. So when we make blacks and whites, we say there's Alaya Vijnana and a Mala Vijnana, there's actually no two consciousnesses. They're absolutely inseparable and embedded each other. It's 2 in 1. So the relative is actually embedded or in the same nature as the absolute. There's no like parting line. It's like some people talk about the blood-brain barrier. Say there's like get the feeling like there's a barrier there. There isn't any. All kinds of discoveries of why it isn't a blood-brain barrier. Where does the tree begin and the ground begin? Where does the sky begin and this room? There's absolutely no separation. But yet we can use concepts to define. That's all. Yeah. Oh, we'll carry on with the text. So page 15. So starting with the last paragraph on page 15, though they are beyond all worldly matters, so we're describing the qualities of bodhisattvas. And of course, don't take this as theoretical. Strive for this. In the Mahayana Vajrayana tradition, you strive to actually pretend to be a bodhisattva. Why? It's a much faster way than waiting 15 billion eons, which is 15 billion times 15 billion years, a long time, waiting for all the qualities to gather in you until you pop out as a bodhisattva. No, you train to be a bodhisattva. You look at your qualities, you look at how you conduct your life, you say, I could do that. I really could try to do that. And that's how we move along a lot faster. So these are the descriptions of the qualities, and if you open up some of the great texts like the Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra, the Jewel Cloud, and so on, they have actually lists of qualities. It's not abstract. It's actually lists and lists and lists of what bodhisattvas do, and so on. And some of them are far out. You've probably read that, right? And you go, nah, no one could do that. Actually, why not? The things that you thought you couldn't do 10 years ago, today you may be able to do that, and so on. So why not? So it says here, though they are beyond all worldly matters. These bodhisattvas do not leave the world. I think we mentioned that yesterday. So staying in the world, being in worlds, being in the six states, the six states of beings, and being able to effectively change the view and the way in which beings see from within that relative way. They act for the sake of all worldly beings within the world, unblemished by its defects. So I mentioned this yesterday, go over this again, is that even though you may have a hand chopped off, even though it may be physically difficult to be in the midst of difficult mental afflictions by sentient beings, if you come from the perspective and you really know, I'm not talking theoretically, by deep soaking in primordial awareness and the stainless pure mind, Vajrasattva, then even if there's physical harm, even if there's mental harm, there's no harm to primordial awareness. That's the perspective of Bodhisattva. It can't be stained. Once you know that, everything changes. Everything changes. So again, I mentioned that yesterday. The lotus is unstained by either dirty water or by the mud at the bottom of the pond. These noble ones are born in the world unpolluted by any worldly phenomena. So if you know it's worldly phenomena, just phenomena, where does it stick to? So here's a question for you. This is to do with insight. This is to do with real penetrative awareness. When you say that I've been harmed or I've been damaged or something, where is that located? But how? What does it stick to? It sticks to a memory. If you attach the memory and you identify with the memory, yes, if you take up the identity with the memory, the identity with the concept, then that's you, right? You relate to that. The same way, at a beginning level, and it's very profound and gets very deep, if you identify with your sensory experience, so you all know what I mean by that? If you identify with your pain, if you identify with your bliss and say, this is my pain, this is my pain in my foot, this is my broken toe, and so on, and that's your concept that the toe is you, that the toe is your mind, the toe is your states, then you're deluded. You're utterly deluded. I'll be nice about it. Utterly deluded. A toothache isn't you. A toothache is a mistake that the sensation is you. Sensation is a sensation. As the Buddha said to a being who was a profound meditative practitioner, but not enlightened, said, just look at the sensation, sensation became awakened. He just got it. That sensation, you don't have to identify it, not because you push it away and you think conceptually, I don't have to. No, it's because there's how many more sensations would you like? Which one is you? That includes mental sensation. So as soon as there's identification as mine, you're finished. It becomes solid. The experience becomes solid, thick, firm, real. As soon as there's a feeling of spacious, loving kindness and openness, you can have, and the experience of this effortless openness, which is great love, then nothing feels solid. Are you getting the idea? It doesn't feel solid. So it doesn't matter if it is or it isn't. It just doesn't feel solid. Even if you put your hand up to a wall, you can actually feel, it doesn't feel solid, David. Doesn't matter if it is or it isn't. You start to see that all this stuff is concepts which are flexibly fluid, made up by the mind. It's really, really important. That's love. That's real love. Beautiful, beautiful quality. So we've already, so in that way, one is untouched by all the concepts. That doesn't mean you can't grieve. It doesn't mean you can't be happy. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy a meal. It's called two in one. You enjoy the meal in the experience that there's actually phenomena happening, and the actual taste of the meal is shunyata. But there's 100 flavors of the meal at the same time. Do you understand? So you can still cook a good breakfast. Understand? That's actually really good. At the same time, knowing it has only one taste. There's no such thing as the taste of coffee. There's a billion possibilities, right? But it all tastes the same. It's all stamped with the nature of emptiness. To have both at the same time and to be flexibly fluid in both of those is the two in one realization. Many beings can't handle it. It's either red or it's blue. It can't be red-blue. It's either polluted or unpolluted. There's no such thing as polluted or unpolluted. Okay?
Hello, Mark.
Yes.
When we were talking about the Alaya consciousness yesterday, I think so this is what you're talking about. There is no separation. It's just the, okay, I forgot it.
Let me give you an example of the Alaya consciousness. There are all kinds of fish and creatures in the ocean.
Right.
They're still the nature of the ocean.
Yeah.
As soon as you isolate them out and you now talk about a species of fish doing this or that, you've created the seeds for karma.
Yeah.
But if you actually understand the infinite openness and creativity of the ocean, the nature of the ocean, it frees it all up.
Yeah.
There are no taints. There's conceptual beings that imagine taints. The clouds, to use this metaphor over and over again, because it's such an excellent metaphor, the clouds are not something separate from the sky. They are the sky. Only a conceptual being would imagine, a thinking being would imagine that the clouds are something separate than the sky. You can never find some place of separation between the sky and the clouds. They're born from the clouds, they go back, and actually that even isn't true. But that's okay, it's useful. Get the idea?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
That's great. So once the seeds of karma, there's a profound insight into the nature of those seeds as emptiness, as insubstantial, having no basis. You now have the transition to the Amala Vijnana. But the Amala Vijnana was always there. It was never not there. It's always stainless. All the defilements are stainless, but you still have to purify. So you're not off the hook. So in other words, people say, oh, good, I now don't have to be concerned about anything I do because it's all of the stainless, purified, absolute nature, natural state. No, because we're relative beings with concepts and habit patterns and dialogue and so on, we still have to purify. Otherwise, we don't purify the activity that creates more karma. Okay, I'll continue on with the text. So then there was a paragraph describing Avalokiteshvara's extraordinary activities with the Asuras. I put that in there to give an example of not of humans, but of some other of the six realms of sentient beings. That here's a being going in and appearing like them, obviously, so they can relate to Avalokiteshvara, appearing in a bodily form like them, and he's teaching them things like being friendly, peaceful, right? Pity. Now, so you can also relate this to humans. This would be like going into maybe an office tower somewhere or someone's home and they're fighting. Does that sound familiar? They're fighting, they're having a quarrel, and going in and saying you can be friendly, you can be at peace, you can have pity, you can have happiness, right? And teaching all these things. Wow, is that true? Do you mean we can be like that? Actually, you could be like that. So, what a beautiful gift. Then the next line in the text says, "And may yogins be satisfied with the glory of the 10 virtues, having purified all the suffering of the samsara of the 6 causes." Well, here's a big one. So let's clarify the meaning of yogins. Yogins, or Naljorpa in Tibetan, is a male practitioner who is on about, so we're giving it from the Buddhist Sanskrit, Buddhist Indian Tibetan perspective, is a person who is doing practices, not to say hatha yoga, although many do learn a lot of hatha yoga, practices for realizing mind's nature. The term yogi is a very high term in Tibet. It means one who has realized mind's nature. It's not reserved for people that just practice. It's actually a very high title. So that's a male, and female is yogini. So a yogi, you can use yogi for both. So the aim there is to realize mind's nature. And Milarepa said this about the yogin's realization. It's beautiful. I put that in there because it's actually good to have it from a great yogi. What does a yogi say about the realization of a yogi, right? So it's good to have that, as opposed to imagining what it is. He said, "So one skilled in realization perceives not consciousness, but pristine cognition." Now, you just read these beautiful poetry and you get most extraordinary pith instructions. It tells you exactly how you meditate, what you're looking for. Instead of being bamboozled by unconscious, conscious, this consciousness, that moment of consciousness, you focus, you completely go for that which is pristine, utterly pure, unchanging, doesn't get born, doesn't die. So the yogin perceives not the apparition of reality, but reality itself. So sometimes I say to people, how many more apparitions of reality would you like? When they come with another meditative experience, I go, how many more would you like? Another 100,000? Which one will it be today? We're not actually after meditative experiences. We're after what is the ground of all meditative experience. What's the ground of all experience? That's Mahamudra, Dzogchen. What's the ground of all experience? That's what we're looking for. So this is reality itself. If you keep getting fooled by cataloging, taxonomically cataloging all the experiences, you never actually look for the nature of all experience. And thence the force of compassion emerges. The enlightened attributes of the Buddhas, he tells you exactly what happens. If you do that, you'll start to see a different kind of compassion. This is the compassion that comes because you realize that beings are not experiencing this, and that's why they wander, that's why they're confused and they suffer. So the heart opens for that profound suffering. The enlightened attributes of the Buddhas, that is the form bodies of Buddhas, emerge. You begin to see and experience the Sambhogakaya, the enlightened attributes of the Buddhas, including power, fearlessness, and retention, emerge in the manner of a precious gemstone. It's beautiful, radiant qualities of the forms of Buddhas and the activities of Buddhas. That is the 5, I like these bowls of rice, or these colored rices, the 5 Buddha, 5 pristine wisdoms, and the 4 Buddha activities. They emerge in the manner of a precious gemstone. And not just precious because they're beautiful, but precious because they really liberate beings. They really liberate beings. There are the measure of my realization of a yogin. This is code for the realization of a yogin as a Vajrayana practitioner is the realization of the 5 primordial wisdoms and the 4 Buddha activities. So just not to forget that. That's what we're aiming for. Not just purification of yourself and not just the end of doing in yourself, but actually this display of the liberation behind it all, which is called the manifesting the 5 pristine wisdoms, the 5 Buddha, wisdom Buddhas, and the 4 Buddha activities. Teague had a question first there. Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering what retention means in this context.
Retention here means staying the course, absolute diligence, and being able to retain and gather all the good qualities. Yeah, that's a sign of great power.
Okay.
So in a sense, what you want to do is when you meditate on Vajrasattva, when you bring down the blessings of Vajrasattva and the Amrit nectar, and you fill your body with the Amrit nectar and the sound of 100 syllables, those 100 syllables are the 100 peaceful and wrathful yidams. You should practice that. That's really good. Practice trying to see 100 different syllables dancing and as radiant figures of the peaceful and wrathful mandalas. See that tonk over there? That's the shitro, the 100 yidams, all dancing, moving, displaying within this illusory body. That's what it's referring to. You have to gather it all together. Retain, gather. Yeah. So all these qualities, gather them into your being and see where they are. See if you can bring them about. Retain them. Not lose them. Yes.
That was my question as well.
Okay. Good. Marvelous. And then one becomes a precious gemstone, a ratna, or a norbu. And they are the measure of my realization of yogin. Though they may be trained or accomplished in understanding the emptiness of appearance and bliss emptiness, they're asked to, also to be satisfied with the excellence, the glory of mastering the 10 virtues. So here it is. Realization of the nature of emptiness. Yes, you might be able to walk through walls. Yeah? But remember that the 10 virtues are really important. So let's review the 10 virtuous activities on page 17. So the 10 virtuous activities are an expansion of the 5 precepts. It's found within the Mahayana tradition. I don't think I've ever seen it listed in the Theravadan tradition, but certainly in the Mahayana teachings, this becomes more prominent. It's an expansion of the 5 precepts. Not to take life, not to take what is not given, to avoid sexual misconduct, not to deceive, avoid slander of others, avoid harsh words, avoid empty speech. Now, empty speech is nebulous. Let's use the word nebulous. If it was empty speech, it's marvelous, wouldn't it? Shunyata speech? It'd be fantastic. Everything is shunyata speech. No, this means nebulous. Go nowhere speech. Avoid greedy thoughts, not to be malicious, avoid the wrong view. That means avoid views that degrade the great view of the vision of Dharma. The 10 virtues are externally powerful. So this text is saying, don't forget the basis of virtue. You hear this over and over again? No matter how high and exalted your contemplation, do not ever forget the virtues. Don't forget causality. Perfecting these 10 qualities is a major and beneficial accomplishment. It's not lowly. It lays the basis of purification to accomplish the realization of pristine awareness. thereby purifying the causes of wandering and samsara, where we mistakenly chase after appearances of the mind, just like grabbing the image of a moon reflect in a pond. So I've already covered that yesterday. Does anybody need me to repeat that again? We would laugh if anybody chased after an image in a pond and tried to grab it. Isn't that right? What do we do all day? We chase after the apparitions of the mind as real solid entities. What do you think that causes?
Clinging.
Massive amounts of suffering. It really hurts. It causes serious consequences. Bodhisattva Manjusri says in the Tantra of the All-Accomplishing King, quote, concerning activities, the yogin apprehends them on the supreme paths, that is the bodhisattva paths, the bodhisattva bhumis, just as a deer pursues a mirage, though they always appear, they are not grasped. The path of liberation is not to get rid of all the apparitions, it's to see the nature of all the apparitions. So again, this is a reference to the magician. You want to be the magician involved in the magic show, know how it happens, and not be subject to the bewilderment of the magic. That's for the audience. Then you help the audience know how the magic is done. That's liberation. So you don't have to, even though apparitions happen, you don't have to grasp. So I'm going to go back to one of my pet topics. And of course, Ludo probably knows what I'm going to get on about here. Only Ludo. No one's ever heard this before from me. One of the reasons for conducting retreats, folks, longer than a weekend or a week or even a month, is to be able to sit in the midst of apparitions of the mind and be able to be steadfast without pushing them away, without rejecting them. That takes practice. That's like playing a musical instrument over and over and over again until you develop the fluidity of when the knives are pushed into you, you don't actually have to react. Have you had apparitions in meditation? You know what I mean by apparitions? Huge floods of afflictive states? It doesn't happen during the day, right? It doesn't happen in your daily life. It just happens
Just when you sit.
just when you sit. Isn't that mysterious?
That's right.
Yeah, I'm joking. Of course it happens in daylight. But when you sit, are you now going to be free of afflictive floods, asavas? No. Nothing's particularly changed. So there's more concentration. You can push it away a little bit. The realization is being able to sit, stand, walk, lie down in the midst of these emanations of mind. Know they're emanations of mind and be not moved. That doesn't mean going, I will not move. You see the empty nature and they liberate. If you can't do that, and that takes time, then there's always going to be something coming along to wipe you out, to sweep you off your feet. So it says, though they always appear, you're not going to stop the appearances of the universe, are you? So you're going to have to know their nature. It's really that simple. They're not grasped. Okay. They're not followed. We chase after appearances of self and others, images due to the 6 causes. Now this is a bit complex. This is something we look at in the Abhidhamma. So this is a reference to the Abhidhamma teachings of the details of causality. I'm not going to go into all those. There's no reason to do that now. You can come to the Abhidhamma retreat. But to say that when you start to analyze causality, how causality occurs, you can actually begin to break up causal factors of how something builds and something collapses, which we do in Abhidhamma to see the factors. And then you can actually develop an equanimity based on the knowledge of how something gets built. So one of the reasons for using the word recollectedness and memory for the word sati. You all know the word sati, yes? Right? You know the word sati in Pali? Usually translated as mindfulness. It's its minor meaning. Mindfulness is the minor meaning. 1885 translation. It just stuck. The major way in which the Buddha and other teachers use mindfulness, is memory and recollectedness. If you can't see, if you don't have the recollectedness how something gets built, you have no way of knowing how it's causally built and how it causally deconstructed. Okay? It's a profound wisdom attainment. We do this all the time, but we don't know we do this, and we don't have very good training this. So we need to know what the originating factors are. We need to know what goes into something. Otherwise, we can't shape it. So this would be like someone training in music and saying, I can't tell whether the note is a clear note or not a clear note. So how could you possibly change how you're doing if you can't tell whether it's wholesome, unwholesome, relatively good, or relatively bad? How do you cook better? Is anybody in the room who would like to cook better? You know, you're all a good bunch of Buddhists, so you'll go, I don't need to. How does anything occur so the quality comes up? Recollectedness, memory. That's how it's done. So we're all taxonomists. Do you know what I mean by that? We're all pretty good taxonomists, which means we divide the world up into names and categories for what purpose? To get a label onto something that allows us to build, allows us to do things. So these 6 causes are a study in how something comes about. The enabling cause, what enables it, what coordinates it, what comes together with it. So give me an example. The original cause of this bell is the bell maker's art of making a bell. But to bring about the sound of bell, you need an enabling or coordinating cause. Mental states. And then you need the same status cause, which keeps it going. The concurrent cause, that is the present supporting conditions. The universal cause or leading cause. What's the leading cause of sound?
An ear? No.
Yeah. What else? You have to have air. You have to have something to transmit it. Unlike Star Wars.
Or water.
You know Star Wars? I love those Star Wars scenes out in outer space where they have guns going off and the big missiles and things, and they shoot through space, and you can hear all that noise. You hear nothing. It's great. I like that. Yeah. No, you need some medium for that. So there has to be a medium for this to take place. If you don't have a medium for things to happen, guess what happens? Nothing. Ever tried to use an air gun, sort of a nail gun with no nails? What happens? Nothing. What happens when there's no compressed air for a nailer? Nothing. Did you get the idea? Conditions. You have to know the factors of conditions that build something. We do this all the time. Think about your day already. Why would you turn on the knob to the shower, the faucet on the shower? To get the water. So we do it all the time. But we're not very precise at it, especially when it comes to what builds us. See? You reach for the ingredients to make a meal, to build a meal. What are the best ingredients to build a saintly human being? That's the Buddha's teaching. I'm still trying to find the quote I read once. I thought I'd never forget where it is. You know that feeling? I'll never forget where that is. This wonderful section the Buddha describes what he's really on about. Someone says, what are you really on about, Buddha? Oh Lord, what are you really on about? He says, I'm building saintly beings. I'm building all the qualities so that the full liberation, full attainment, it comes about. It's a beautiful description of all the saintly qualities trying to do. Just can't find it now. One of these days it will come up. Okay? So if you study So much of Dharma, teaching of the suttas and the sutras and the tantras, is all the causal factors you put together to bring about awakening. That's what we're doing. So that's the answer there, Terry, to that question of dwell in the pristine awareness. No, you have to put the causes and conditions together. Right? For some, the answer is perfectly correct. Dwell in pristine awareness, all you need to do. But for 99% of most people, they need the causes and conditions that allow that to happen. If there's nothing I would say more this weekend, that would be it. Because it's such a big problem today. Trying to jump into pristine awareness without the causal conditions is like trying to build a house where you haven't built a foundation for it. Trying to launch a rocket ship without the fuel is very hard to do. I used to do that as a kid. I used to get these giant boxes for a refrigerator or whatever, sit inside them and draw all kinds of stuff like a Apollo command capsule and launch off the planet. You can do that conceptually, but actually it's really hard to put satellites into orbit. Okay, so we want to put satellites into orbit properly. To do that, we actually have to put the causal conditions in. Maybe we should go visit Elon Musk's rocket ship factory and see what goes on to actually launch a rocket into space. Then we add the 5 poisons or the 10 wholesome activities into the above 6 causes and conditions, and the predicted resultants are evident. We see the ripening. We see the dominant result. We see the result similar to its cause, the personal result, and the result of freedom. This is a study in how you build freedom. Freedom is the natural state, but an apparitional being that's subject to cause and conditions has to put the right cause and conditions in place for the realization, for the glimpse and confidence in that natural state. Okay. Yes.
So, Lama Mark, if karma is cause and causality, are these the elements of
These are the elements of
building
karma.
Karma.
That's correct.
And so, if I understand, a being understands what causes one's behavior to be in a certain way, with a result, one therefore, if one was paying attention and had motivation, could change the behavior, change the result. And this all linked together here.
That's correct. So the so much of the path of wisdom before we get to contemplating pristine awareness is getting to the causes and conditions of awakeness that are clear without all the stories that aren't clear.
Which are the apparitions that we cling to.
That's right. So we want finer and more refined causes and conditions without all the story making. So for instance, we really don't need any other story to know why most things happen except for greed, hatred, delusion, pride, and jealousy. We don't. So when someone says to you, oh, you know, this happened, this happened, this happened, you can actually just look to the 5 poisons, or you can look to the opposites. Yeah? That's what's beautiful with Dharma. But that takes a mature mind that actually looks at cause and conditions in a very pure manner and gets rid of all the embellishments around it. So we do this as an exercise often in the house here. Isn't that true? Often. And I maybe you do that too. Is something happens, for instance, let's say suddenly the bird feeder falls off and lands on the ground. So why did that happen? And then all of a sudden you see all the stories come out, right? Immediately all the stories are very complex, they're very elaborate. But why? So I'm often trying to go, come on, let's come back to the pristine reasons, right? And you say, oh, maybe it's neglect, you know? That wire that you saw that was rusting, or, you know, neglect. And you say, okay, so it's neglect, we get there. But actually, what is neglect? See? One of the three poisons. Or why did that magnificent thing get built? Love and kindness. But you can make all kinds of stories around it. So the process of insight is to strip bare all the stories and get to the most essential principles. The most essential principles. Yeah. Why is the food rotten in the refrigerator? There's a reason for it. But we can make up all kinds of stories. The refrigerator isn't working. No, the refrigerator actually is embedded in causes and effects of human cognition. You see? So you have to kind of do that. Yeah. Yeah.
So neglect would be ignorance.
Neglect would be ignorance, but actually it may in fact, always ignorance, but may in fact it may be rooted in a greed or a hatred. It possibly will be. But neglect is usually just a dullness, a dull mind. By the way, it hasn't fallen off and looks pretty good. But that's happens. You know, people say, "Oh, you know, my car just suddenly stopped." The chances are that the sound and the various things of that car were happening for weeks beforehand. The O-ring that fell apart in the space shuttle and killed the crew of the space shuttle didn't just happen. It turned out to be neglect and lack of inspections and so on. So it wasn't just a mysterious happening. It turned out to be an O-ring that people knew wouldn't work. That's really what it was. Just like the recent tragedies with the Boeing airplane. It's been known there's a serious problem, but it's not just neglect. Okay. So one has to trace it back to some very clear causes and conditions. So the point of this is not an intellectual practice. The point of this is something that's essential to all Dharma wisdom. Knowing very clearly through experience that which is wholesome, that which is unwholesome, that which builds liberation, that which provides for liberation, that which degrades liberation. It's really clear. This is wisdom. And that's why it's saying these 10 wholesome activities are absolutely critical, because you can be meditating but actually poisoning yourself. So let me give you an example. It's great to go to that place of retreat. They have wonderful water there, something like that, yeah? And meanwhile, you're meditating there, but you're drinking poisoned water or tainted water. It's not conducive to liberation. So you have to get the causal conditions that are conducive to liberation. Therefore, all of us have to get very wise and clear about the ethics, about the 10 virtues, about the causal factors that go into our life that provide the foundation and the basis for contemplating the nature of emptiness and opening up compassion. Okay, is that pretty clear? So as Guru Rinpoche was very, very straightforward on this point. I'll give an exact quote, I think. Let's see if I can give an exact quote from a terma. If one can't discern that which is to be adopted and that which is to be avoided, what hope is there? How's that for clarity? So ignoring the 10 virtuous activities and ignoring cause and result means that no liberation is going to occur. There's no foundation for it. There's no basis for it. Okay? Even though that the basis is there in the entire universe always, there's no basis for a conditioned being to make that realization. Next one. May we quickly obtain the omniscience of complete Buddhahood on page 18. I've just broken down some of the words there. So Lho Nuden Dorje asked us to undertake an enormous and compassionate aspiration to quickly attain the omniscience. Now, I've gone on to a lot about this because I had a good time with this. I really started to going, why are we using the word omniscience and maybe it's the wrong translation? You think, well, I went on kind of a tangent, but actually, it has a lot to do with our belief of what enlightened being is and what we're up to. So the word in Sanskrit, sarvakara, the maker of all, or all-knowing, or translated as omniscient. Remember, these are translations. The all-knowing. That's actually the literal translation of sarva jnata, or sarva jnata, of complete Buddhahood. So omniscience, as defined in English, in the Webster's English Dictionary, is having infinite awareness, understanding, and insight. But where did the word come from? How did that word creep into the English language? And it's a Latin word meaning omni and scientific. It's omniscientific. Omniscience. We have to understand where the word came from. Omniscience is a 16th century word. We're talking 1500s. What was the condition of science in the 1500s in Europe?
Terrible.
Limited.
Some people with some atomic ideas of atoms, and mostly earth, water, fire, air. And the very glimmerings of what we would call science today. All right? So could you know all of science in the 1500s?
No.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. You could know every single book and single thing written on science in the 15th century. You could be omniscience. You could have memorized the entire Bible and every single book written at that time. Totally. 150, 60 years later, you could not have. There's already 1 million books circulating in Europe after the printing press. Isn't that something? Mm-hmm. But when the word came about, there was only a few books. There weren't very many books. And you really could literally know most of the European languages. Well, maybe not Basque. But most of the major languages you would probably know. You'd know Latin, you'd know Greek, English, French, German. Quite common. Latin. It's normal. So this word omniscience. But let's look at the word omniscience today. Have you read this? Maybe I don't have to go through all this. But would you like to know everything? Who here in the room would like to know everything that's on the internet?
Thank you.
How about all the scientific papers ever published? No. Do you think you could actually do it? No. Let's say you had a superhuman mind, a Buddha mind, and you could retain every bit of knowledge. Why would you want to?
Only to awaken.
Yeah. So what would be the purpose? And does it make any sense? How about the dark web? Who here would like to know all the information, all the conspiracy theories, which some people here still study deeply, all the blogs? Who here would like to know every bit of that information, be able to dialogue on it? I'm not seeing a hand go up. So what does omniscience really mean? Okay, so it may be time that we did in that word. We actually stopped using that word.
Well, could it be applied to Buddha?
Could it? What do you think? Do you think a Buddha would be interested and want to know all the information on the dark web? Maybe all the components of military weapons that are sold secretly?
No.
What do you think?
No.
Drug trades? Secret Bitcoin transfers? What do you think? Do you think it would be even not even interested? Do you think it even worthwhile knowing?
Well, given that it's all human construct, why would you want to know?
Ah, very good. So if you don't know about the nature of illusion, that all phenomena and knowledge is actually illusory, then maybe you want to use the word omniscience because you think it's actually useful. Okay, I'm just going to put that in there. So I put in here, I've made an argument for perhaps why we shouldn't use that word anymore, but perhaps omniscience was always the wrong translation. So who's got the agenda to make a Buddha omniscient in the idea of a Western completely knowing being? That's what I'm wondering about. Okay? Or the Eastern composers of texts wishing for their Buddhas to know everything, when in fact why would a Buddha have to know everything? Okay. So in an illusory world of interdependent constructs, is the wisdom understanding of a bodhisattva and a Buddha simply about facts and knowledge, experience, theories, and models? And I'm saying no. So then we should really look at what the Buddha said omniscience is. So if we go back to the suttas, it says here, when the Buddha was asked about that, in a particular sutta, it says here, the recluse Gautama knows 3 knowledges. Saying it thus, they would be saying the right thing and not blaming me falsely. So even during the Buddha's time, people were saying, a Buddha must have all this knowledge. He's saying, no, it doesn't. That's interesting, eh? Even back his time. So he's saying to Wacha, who's obviously saying, what is it you know? I hear you're omniscient. And he's saying, whenever I desire, I recollect the manifold previous births, that is causality of beings, such as 1 birth, 2 births, with all modes and all details. Thus I recall the manifold previous births. And then he says, with desire, the purified heavenly eye beyond humans sees beings disappearing and appearing, that is, dying and arising, in unexalted and exalted states, that is, he knows the states of wholesome and unwholesome, beautiful and ugly, in good and bad states. That means he knows that which is wholesome, that which is unwholesome in beings. He knows that which is jhanic in beings, beautiful, and he knows what is beatific. That's what it means. That's what we get to study in Abhidhamma, all those states. I see beings according to their actions. That means clearly seeing cause and effect. Vacha, destroying desires, my mind released and released through wisdom, here and now by myself realizing I abide. Vacha, it is said, the recluse Gautama knows the 3 knowledges. Saying it thus, you would be saying the right thing and not blaming me falsely. Cool, isn't it? So it's actually good, before you use the word omniscience, to see what the Buddha thought of the word omniscience. He's clearly saying, no, I don't need to know all that other stuff. I need to know the essentials of what liberates beings, what's important for the liberation of beings. And then in another place it says, the Buddha says it's possible to know and see all, though not simultaneously. It takes work. So he actually says, I need time. Is that interesting? So what does that mean? Let me look at it, and I'll get back to you. So I had this wonderful experience with Nam Rinpoche from time to time, where someone would ask him a question, or I'd ask him a question. It was lovely. Being a very encyclopedic mind, sometimes you just ask him anything, and he'd know about this and that and this and that. And I had the lovely experience sometimes. He says, I'll get back to you later. I'm going to go and study it. I'm going to go look at it. People often didn't hear that, but I'll get back to you later. And sometimes I remember a month later, in the middle of a car ride, in the middle of supper, he'd say, da-da-da-da. It would just come out. It's fantastic. You'd be walking somewhere. I remember once in a car, 6 months later, we're just driving somewhere. He says, by the way, let's go over this again. I'm now going to tell you how it happened. He had to, so it can take time. So really, when you study the commentaries and you study the suttas and so on, it says a Buddha is omniscient to the degree that all things knowable are potentially accessible. Potentially accessible. And this is a statement that Namdra Rinpoche used to say, is that when a being's mind is purified, arahata, then they have the freedom to explore, to not just to know, to understand, the freedom. Not that it's just there, but the freedom. And I think that's more important. And then another sutta, the Buddha says he denies omniscience. but again claims 3 higher knowledges, which are listed above. And further, he describes 3 higher knowledges he developed during each watch of the night on his enlightenment. I'm not going to go through these, but you can read through these. Again, it's about past lives and knowing the conditioning factors of beings for purposes of liberation, where they go and where they arise. So these are qualities for helping beings awaken. That's really what it's about. It's compassion. So let's look at them on page 22. Supreme Buddha possesses 6 kinds of knowledge not shared by others. These incomparable qualities are, I'm not sure where this quote came from. I didn't make it up. Okay, number 1. A little lack of scholarship there, Mr. Weber. Where did that quote come from? Well, I guess I found it and then the footnote vanished. Number 1, knowledge of the inclinations and latent inherent tendencies of all beings. Inclinations and for what purpose? Liberation. Knowledge of the mental faculties and their state of maturity in all beings. For what purpose? Helping them liberate. Yeah. Knowledge of omniscience and omnipotence. That is, and what does that really mean? If you translate the word sabba jnana, it means bodhi jnana. It means wisdom or the knowledge of awakening, of the awakened nature. Number 4, knowledge of penetrative clarity without obstruction, unrestricted access to any objective field. That means you can investigate anything. So here's something I was on about yesterday. The statements of a student. You can tell a student, shouldn't, can't, won't, will not. Obstructive mind. That's, by the way, that doesn't mean you could say, by the way, here's the difference. Who here would like to go on a 1-month trip on a boat, a research vessel, around all of Antarctica? Who here in the room? But there used to be people go, I can't do that. And you say, why? Well, I don't have money in my bank. I can't do that financially. But you could. So you could put your hand up and say, I would like to, but when it comes down to the practicality, it says, right now I can't, but I will try to find a way to do that. Did you see the difference? So one is an obstruction that closes the investigation. One is an openness that allows for the possibilities. Right? So unrestricted access to any objective field, any investigation. And number 5, knowledge of the twin miracle. Now that's quite extraordinary. The ability of the twin miracle is for beings who are arahata. It is said that you can emanate water and fire out of each of your hands. So out of your right hand comes fire, and out of your left hand comes water. That's pretty cool. Okay, and that's been documented or been witnessed by a number of beings who've had great attainment. And number 6, knowledge of that means control over the dhatus, over the elements. Great control. Number 6, knowledge of the attainment of great compassion by which he looks at the world. So these are the kinds of knowledges. They're very useful. And they don't necessarily include all the knowledge of the intricacies that happens on the dark web. What are they on about? They're all on about compassion. Yeah, liberating beings. And I think that's a good place to take a break. That's where we're headed. That's what we want. We want such a compassionate being of knowledge for liberation. That's the manifestation you want. Not filled with a bunch of data. Is data useful? Absolutely. Just don't buy it as being truth. It's provisional information. Yeah. Yes.
Can
It used to be that miracles were actually fairly useful for gaining faith into Dharma. If, let's say I could, I don't know, maybe I could, but it's possible, but let's say I was to levitate right now 3 feet off this chair. It still wouldn't help in this world for teaching of Dharma. People would just say, well, where's the wires? Magicians do that all the time. If I said, oh, okay, I've got great meditative skill, there's a box here and we put someone in the box and I take a big saw and I cut through their body, right? And say that's a demonstration of great mental concentration and great psychic abilities, you'd say, well, that's a nice magic trick. I can watch that on television. I've seen that by performers on stage. Flying, levitate, all that kind of stuff. So, but there was a time when the use of the transformation of the dhatus, of the elements, was actually a very useful way of teaching and gathered great conviction to the Dharma. I don't really see that as being, personally, I wouldn't know, but I don't see it as being very powerful today. I really don't. Because we have all kinds of things today that are actually in some ways even more spectacular. So it's getting spectacular. But also the demonstration of the transformation of the elements shows great understanding of emptiness and openness. Not just understanding, actual knowledge. Actual knowledge. Yeah, of openness. And of the ability for the movement and transformation of the dhatus. Yeah. Okay. So very compassionate. Let's take a 10-minute break and start again at 11 o'clock, approximately.